And we also had identified some repeated themes. The repeated theme was consolidation of the elementary school or property owner that was willing to continue or to enter into discussion of property acquisition, and that was the Reese owned property by Hilltop. The remaining part of the meeting, we explored the district-owned sites. We took those 8 master plan concepts that you gave us in meeting 2 and looked at the feasibility of those. And overall, most of them looked very doable. Some of them had challenges, of course, like the Canfield Middle School property, rebuilding on that site, and maybe some impact to the high school site. If we build on that, it may involve some relocation of ball fields and other things such as that. But overall, great session. It was all kind of open forum. Please go to the committee website that's on the district website info page under facility project. As of today, everything should be updated, previous meetings. Updated Q&A, that will be continuously updated as the questions come in and we answer them. We're going to have some more tonight. January. So, tonight's agenda.
Gym or auditorium. So somebody knows about LFI. Okay? This is an LFI question. We're going to talk probably more about that coming down the road. But if there's a second gym or an auditorium, which basically means it's not co-funded by OFCC, could potentially be sponsored by an outside organization or individual. As we prepare to build, is there a way to explore finding wealthy benefactors in Canfield who would be willing to contribute to the project? The answer is absolutely. You know where I live and work because it's the same place, give me a call. All right? If and when that time comes, if that's something that interests you, and I tell you what, you'd be surprised in Canfield. You find people who are passionate about something, look out. Look out. I've already seen it. Okay?
Wow,
I'm
that's
done.
it.
There you go. Thank you.
Yes.
I have a question that I didn't get to send in. With the program's called ELP that we got into. So when I was reading an article about ELP. So when we get say the school or the state's going to give us 16%. Say we're going to spend $100 million. That's $16 million when our time comes in line. Do we have to spend that money on a project identified in our master plan, or is it just a straight refund to the school?
Great question. So if you didn't hear the question, he said, when we get the state credit, essentially what can we use it for? Are there stipulations? So you have to use it towards either a building project. It doesn't have to be identified in your master plan. It could be a pool, an auditorium, or some type of structure, or you can use it to pay down the debt from the bond issue. So you can reduce the burden on the taxpayers. So a lot of districts, what they do is they do a segment of the master plan, knowing they're going to get a future credit. When they get the future credit, they finish the master plan, but you don't have to do it. You can take your credit and do whatever you want with it. I mean, you can't, I think, use it. There are legalities to it. I don't think you can use it for teacher salaries or things like that, but you're not restricted to, as you said, a predetermined building project.
So you can use it to pay it back down.
You can use it,
Okay.
yep, and unless they change it anytime soon, right now that is the rule. Yes.
The OFCC is brought up, and I could have missed it, which is a good possibility. So when we talked about it, you were like, well, it's something that you used the example of air conditioning. We talked about stipulations with it. You said, well, it's like air conditioning. You're going to do it anyways, so you can get the money. Why don't you go with it? It makes sense. But then that night I was thinking about it. Is there a way to have a list, a printout list of their stipulations? Because it's like, well, that's a great stipulation, we're gonna do it anyways. But what if there's some nasty stipulations that we're like, whoa, that's not a good one?
So we're actually working with the OFCC to update the design manual, and part of that is to be very descriptive of what type of system specifically. So in layman's terms,
So we don't even know what we're agreeing with.
So it's in there, the system's in a specification format that kind of tells you, like, it needs to be, be able to provide simultaneously heating and cooling, and certain things like that, but we're trying to make it more informative so that everybody can understand what they're entering into.
It's confusing.
It is very-
And it's brought up so much, like, my first impression when we first started talking about it, stuff was, OFCC, we've gotta get this OFCC, it's like do or die, and then the more you look into it, it's like,
Yeah.
which I felt that way before, but then it's like, wait, there's stipulations, and shouldn't we know all of them before we, you know?
And the good thing is, if you don't meet certain expectations in terms of space or systems, they just reduce your credit. It doesn't mean like it's all or nothing. You do, so if the district feels passionate about a certain system, rooftop units, for example, that are not design manual compliant, you really feel like that's the way you wanna go, you still do it, but it's gonna be, your 16% credit is gonna be reduced to reflect the cost difference in those systems.
Do you guys, and this is sheer curiosity, does TDA have a contract with them? Do they get like something, subsidized or so?
No, it's just our specialty is K-12, so the majority of school districts work with them, so it's just kind of an organic thing. We have absolutely no contract with OFCC. Okay. So I would encourage everybody to continue sending your information through the Q&A. This is great. That way, if you miss a meeting, you can see the answers. It was a
I
great.
didn't know about this Q&A.
I know, I think, yes, I know.
Okay.
So now it is up and running, and of course, we'll accept questions here, and we'll stay afterwards if you have more.
So it's on the website you can go to?
Emily, it's on this,
Yep, it was emailed out, there's a link, and there is on the website in the top right under supporting material. I think there's a link there as well as you can email Mr. Knoll.
I have a question mark?
all right, we're trying to get better at that. All right. So new information, we've been saying we want to be done in April, just to give you kind of a target date on that. The board meeting on April 9th, we would hope, our expectations, our hopes and aspirations are to have a master plan recommendation by April, for the April 19th board meeting, just so you have that in your head. And that leaves us about 6 remaining meetings. Now we have our master plan options. We're gonna start shortlisting those, refining those down to a few preferred, layering on which sites we wanna utilize, talking about locally funded initiatives, extra gyms, and what types of funding layers that adds on. Big thing for tonight compared to 2 weeks ago. We have updated enrollment projections. I'm going to very briefly talk about that. They have gone up. That means more students, more square foot, more cost. We have now the enhanced environmental abatement costs for any plan that includes a renovation. There is more fine-tuned numbers on what the abatement cost would be for that. We mentioned, and I know some of you weren't here last meeting, when we talked about the new construction costs, and all the numbers we were using are based on 2022 cost set. OFCC at the end of March, first week of April-ish, releases the annual update. So the 2023 costs will be coming out then. Had a conversation with them, and they gave us a little intel and insight that we should anticipate about a 10% increase this year. They don't have that number finalized yet, they're working in it now, but that it would be wise for us to start applying that now, so we don't get to near the end of 1 or 2 master plans and now the costs go up and you say, well, wait, maybe I don't want to do that now, I may want to look at this plan. So we've applied that 10% increase, and the other thing that is going to layer on an additional cost that we just applied is the elective storm shelter cost. That's really an administration decision if we're going to include a storm shelter in the project or not for each school facility, but at least you can see what the cost impact is if it is in there.
How big of a storm shelter are you talking?
It's based on the capacity of the building, and then you have to have so much square foot per person, so many restrooms, and that area has to be strengthened in terms structurally to sustain like a F5 tornado, hurricane force winds. So it's substantial. So the update in the enrollment projections, and again, these are online, so it's again a massive document that you have to comb through to find the one page that means something. We were working with these numbers that were developed in 2021. They went 10 years out. Right now, we have 2,460 students approximately, and all of our numbers have been planning and based on 2,520. We just got the new enrollment projections, and they went up about 77 students district-wide, so now we're hovering close to 2,600 students now that we're planning for. That equates to about 136 students more than we have today. So,
That would be in 10 years.
correct. So it's that number is for 2032, 2033 school year. Can you believe that? I remember when we were looking at numbers 2008, 2009. Gosh. Is there any other questions before we move on?
This organization that does the enrollment projection,
Future Think.
yeah, is this a company that you work with a lot?
They exclusively do enrollment projections for the OFCC. There used to
I
be
see.
2 companies, maybe 15 years ago, but that other companies no longer holds a contract with them. But they are the main enrollment projection expert in Ohio.
So their projections are usually fairly accurate?
On the most part, yes. And they use a blended methodology, and that methodology is in that
Right.
report of birth rates, death rates, housing permits, what's going on in Ohio as a
Right, I
trend.
understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were just, I read through it, and it just, there were some things that I didn't understand, that's all. And I don't really want to take
Yeah, we
a
can
lot
talk,
of time here, but,
we'll go over it with you, Stacy. No problem with that. It is really deep and complex.
yeah, like for example, it says the Canfield Local School District is comprised of Canfield, Boardman Township, and Youngstown. And it doesn't include, the study doesn't include Canfield Township or Beaver Township. That just didn't make sense to me. It also excludes 44512 area codes, and
Okay.
we have students who live in those.
Okay.
So I don't know, it just, those things interested me. I think we just don't want to make a mistake of building a school that's too small, that's all.
Understood, absolutely. Yeah, we'll reach out to Future Think, and it could just be that everything wasn't listed on there, and they did include it, but let's investigate that and have an answer for that next week. So I mentioned the bulk of of tonight will be in group work, going through the pros and cons of that, but if you don't mind, TDA team passing out the master plan options. This was the summary slide from last week that that cataloged the concept of the master plans that you formulated in our first meeting, but tonight we're actually going to go through those in more detail, and we're going to give you a handout of each of those. That's why I'm kind of going past that. We have more in-depth information to go into on each plan. Just want to point out, and Joe, insert anything that I may not be covering here. Right now, at this point in time, I talked to you about what's been added to the plans. What is not in the plans right now, in the costs, are considerations for an additional middle school gym. We haven't collectively discussed that and voted on that yet, though we've seen clear indication, both from the district and from you, that 2 middle school gyms are necessary. It's what you have now. When we shortlist some master plans, if we need phasing or swing space, that'll be another layer of cost added. Looking at Shields Road, it's farmland. It's all that topsoil will have to, if that is the chosen site for a particular master plan, we'll have to remove that topsoil, bring in new soil and compact it. Topsoil from farming is not suitable for building on. That'll be an additional cost. Property acquisition, been talking a lot about additional properties. New board offices, auditoriums. Again, at the middle school site, if we're talking about relocation of the bus garage, as well as at the high school if we have to relocate any ball fields. So this will be the next step as we dive into sites.
Cheryl,
Yes.
question. Now, since we're talking about OFCC pricing, is that a guarantee? Let's say this all goes through, decide we're gonna go with the OFCC, we pick out if we're gonna build or rehab and so on, and that figure stated, is that going to be sufficient, not sufficient, when it goes out to bid, what happens then?
Well, you used the word guarantee in the beginning, it is not guaranteed. So we collectively, as a group, as we near closer to the end of March and April, really need to have a conversation about how we feel, what our pulse is on the economy. And we can give information about how bids are coming in on our projects, as well as other projects throughout Ohio, and make the decision if we want to layer in additional money as a cushion. Many districts do that, a lot of them do that. So that is a future conversation we need to have, but from OFCC, in terms of a guarantee of the price, no.
Okay, so that's another contingency based upon all those other contingencies.
There's lots of contingencies, yeah, there's
Yeah,
lots
there's
of.
like 28% on the things you've given us so far, contingency. This would be another.
Dependent, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we always start, and unfortunately, it's the nature of the beast with the timing of school districts, putting a project on the ballot and planning, and them doing their annual updates. We're trying to get ahead of them right now for you.
Okay, based upon what we've discussed so far, would your recommendation, or maybe you don't want to recommend, but would your recommendation be that we don't use the OFCC, or you don't want to put that out there right now?
I think in the next 2-3 weeks, we need to have that conversation, and I think we need some time to gather some more data. We've had some good bid results. In our opinion right now, it seems like things are starting to taper off, but you never know what could happen in the world next week that sends, you saw how fast everything, so let's broach that a little in a few weeks. Yes.
So one of the things that I would just encourage this entire group to do is to, when we're looking and talking about these sites, I encourage people to get out and actually walk those sites and take a look at them. I did that recently, and I will say that my opinion changed about some things, and that what do I think would be a good location and things like that. So I really encourage people to get out and walk Hilltop, go out and see the Shields Road property, go walk that, just kind of get out there and look at, hands-on, don't just take a look at the pictures.
Yeah, empower yourself
Right.
with knowledge. That's a great recommendation.
Excuse me, you
Yes.
said these numbers are just 10% higher?
No, what I said was that we have new enrollment projections, so the enrollment has gone up, so that means more square foot per student, more cost per square foot, so that raises the cost. Storm shelter has been layered in, the storm shelter hardening, which is a significant cost, 10% increase, as well as a few, they're very minor. If we go OFCC requirements like ADA playground for elementary schools and so forth, so it's not like,
That's in these numbers?
that's in these numbers that yep, correct, yep.
Do we know how much it would drop if the shelter wasn't?
I do. So let me jump in and give you a breakdown. All right, let me give you a little breakdown. So first of all, let's take a look at the master plan number 1 here. All right, now, I gotta be honest with you, this has been painful. I sat down with my maintenance staff, I said, man, here's what we gotta do. You remember what that high school renovation number is? All in, 50 million. I gotta be honest with you, there's no way we're gonna pull it out and try to get something passed. So I sat down with my guys and I said, here's the deal. What are the must-haves, like next week in this building? And I came up with a list. It's not all-inclusive, that's why it's painted. Okay, we're not gonna be able to fix this high school with one fell swoop here. So what we've done is we've identified 15 million. So every time you see high school renovation throughout today, you're gonna see $15 million. That's it. I said painful, right? It is, because here's what that 15 million is gonna pay for. About 3 or 4 things, that's it. Number 1, the roof above your head. Number 2, that terrible parking lot you have when you try to meander out there. And number 3, foundation. Okay, we have some areas in the high school that the walls aren't perpendicular anymore. Okay? I'm hoping, because we go back to Den's comment here, you always got to kind of have a little contingency. I'm hoping we can squeeze in some lighting, I'm hoping, and maybe windows. But for the high school, my recommendation is going to be 15 million max to pull this thing off. Okay? So let's talk about a storm shelter. This is a tough one for me too. But let me give you what some of the numbers are, just so you have an idea. On this slide right here, for the high school, it's $608,000 for a storm shelter, $608,000. Okay? Yes.
I have a question about the storm shelters. Are they something that would only be used for the high school kids or the school kids, or would they be something that the community could use?
Touche,
You
good
know how,
question.
if you see on the news that something happens to someone and people go to
Yep.
schools or other public buildings, would that be part of the storm
My
shelter?
thought would be our community could use it. We
So-
can't.
It's sized for the capacity of the building occupants, not for
So we
food.
couldn't have 800 community members come if it was sized for 800? Really?
Well, it's sized, the area that, in an existing building, now we're having to redo the existing structure, but it's sized for the students and the staff of that building, and restrooms, showers are required based on that capacity
They're the only
too.
ones that can use it.
It's sized for the occupant.
Could you explain what that is?
A storm shelter?
Yeah, what is that? What does that look like?
What's it look like? Well, I'll let the professionals take over, but basically, it's going to be a structure, it's going to be a compound. It's going to be a compound.
An additional building?
Well, doesn't have to be, no.
It's
No,
a portion,
doesn't have to.
portion of the school that has been structurally hardened to sustain hurricane or tornado force winds. So it's just an
What
area.
does that mean? I mean, structurally.
Like a gym, a gymnasium, right, is a possibility, Cheryl, that could be structured.
And Cheryl, can I just interrupt you as well to this question? You elaborated on that. This would be used in the fact that if school was in session, then we would have to get, so that's
That was
why,
my question,
that's
yeah.
why you wouldn't be able to bring community members in, and it's sized for if the school was actively in session and they needed to get immediate shelter.
That was my-
That's where they would be.
That was
going.
my question. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Two more.
I'm good, I think you were just clarifying here, but I mean, let's say something happened on the weekend, the community could use it, we could open it up to the community.
Yes, but
because it
it's
has
not
capacity
sized for the
800
community at large.
Right,
And that's where I was headed.
right, exactly, that's why I wanted to
Did they do
clarify.
for this, and I could sound ignorant, that's why I'll shut up after this, because it's not my kid, you're not a kid. So, did they do statistics with Ohio, like how many tornadoes come through here and hurricanes? Like, instead of the storm shelter, what if we allocated that money towards bulletproof drywall? I know that's not cheap, you know, and it's just the world we live in today. We can never feel like it can't happen to us.
And Ken, that's a good point, and at the end of the day, that's going to be my recommendation to the board. That's really what this is going to come
With the
down to.
storm shelter
Yeah,
or
yeah.
more secure with?
The storm shelter piece itself, yeah.
And it was a code thing, not OFCC, and it is elected now, but yes, it's an administration decision, really. It wasn't really part of the charge for this committee.
I'm just surprised it's the first, I mean personally, this is the first I've heard of this. It's like a significant, all this talk of levies, the last levy, like, this is the first.
Because there's been a moratorium, and then we'll move on from this, but there's been a moratorium, which means they put it into code, and they said, we're gonna take a pause on it because we really need to reevaluate this. I can't say how many studies, I don't have that information, I'm sure it's out there. And then they eliminated it from the code, and OFCC is still saying it's elective to you if you wanna do it or not, and reaches out to the school district to see. So, just for you to be able to see how much,
And this is only for the high schools?
No,
No,
let's
for
keep
all
going.
of them.
So that 5 through 8
Correct.
up there, 496,000, 496. And for the pre-K 4, 560. Now, those numbers will change. If you had a PK 6, it'd be a little bit different, right? But that at least gives you some bearings. I'm not gonna go over any more of those numbers moving forward. It's just like a landmark, okay, just so y'all know what that's at.
That's standard.
Will we know for sure when we go for this
Pro
levy
woman,
that it's included or not?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So I wanted to cover the high school renovations. As hard as that was for me to tell you, 15 million, we're gonna try and make that work. And then the storm shelter piece is there, and I think that's
Yeah,
all I
so
wanted to
we
share.
repeated this for, I'm not gonna go through all the plans because I don't wanna take your time for your group work, but as that summary we captured last week, we've updated all 8 plans. I do wanna point out, if you'll turn to master plan number 6. I didn't have enough space on the summary slide last week, but it should be one here in kind of red, pink, whatever color you want to call it. and I can't remember if it was one group that came up with two variations or two different groups that had the same concept with two variations. This plan is essentially the same except for one grade level where it goes between 6A and 6B. So it does have a cost impact, as you can see. But that's the only additional piece of information I think we want to pull out. So we really, want you to take a look through these, talk about them, what your preferences are. There's 8 plans, and as I said, to keep on targeting time, we need to start narrowing them down, and I think that collectively as a group, we can weed a few of these out so that now we can spend the rest of our time the next few weeks really focusing on the plans that you seem most feasible and viable, diving deep into the site studies and the LFI. So Joe, is there anything you wanted to add before we?
No, we're gonna pass out some tickets here for tables, but other than that,
Cheryl, one last thing about pricing. Now, how do you price out adding, not building new, but adding in addition to the high school at grade 7 and 8? It's never been answered.
It's the same.
It's the square footage?
It's a square footage. So in that chart that I showed you at the top, in the very top of every column, it has a number of students and a number of square feet. So you just utilize that. So
The one with all the little schools on it.
the one that's almost impossible to read. No. I'll get it queued up, so now I can go over it with you here in just a few minutes. But yeah, it's the same concept, just by the number of students, the number of square foot.
I know it's on the list for Mr. Knoll building. Is there a rough cost of how much a standalone administrative office would be added to the plan?
Next week. I do have it, I can't remember it well off the top of my head, but we are looking at that as part of the LFI. Yep. Go
I want
ahead.
to ask a question actually to Mr. Knoll and
Get you
Mr.
a
Atway.
FEMA trailer.
As I'm looking at this, it appears to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that we are looking at these plans now as options. And when I look through these, all of these plans are very close to the 108 million that we tried to pass, which was not passed. Some of them are now even over. It kills me to say this, but it needs to be said. The voters are not going to vote for that kind of money.
Wasn't the
Never.
old one 135?
I don't think anybody's arguing with that. These dollars that you see today are from master plans that this group has put together.
Right.
So,
But that's what I'm saying, I think we need to also look, besides
Yeah.
looking at these master plans, we've got to look at other options.
well, I don't think you need to look at other options. You need to look at the segmenting piece of it.
Right.
So
The
for example,
priority piece.
yeah, so for
Like, this is
example,
what part we need to tackle
I'm looking
now
at
as the
at
priority.
Dr. Betsy's here, and she's got master plan 5. So let's say we got 40 million for the high school and making it at 612, and we got a pre-K 5 at 49. At some time, we gotta look at this and say, well, we can't do 92 maybe, but do we wanna do a new pre-K 5 at 49? That's the conversation we need to have tonight, okay, as we start walking our way through all these master plans, because it's a game changer when I put the numbers on there, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Okay.
and, it'd be
That's
really
tough.
easy, you saw that, you just mentioned that, it's 143 million. I mean, I really believe that the majority of you tonight are gonna say, put that plan aside, let's focus our attention on the ones that are more palatable to our district.
Basically, in my opinion, we're looking at being only able to tackle one building at this time, if we truly want this thing to be passed. I don't want that, that's not what my wish would be, but I'm just thinking about the community as a whole. I think that's all we're gonna be able to get through with
Plus
the
high school
cost.
renovation.
But
Right, plus high school renovation.
So
Thank you.
two things. I love the question, but and correct me if I'm wrong, Joe. So
Yes.
we're saying as they're looking at this, don't just think of the master plan. You can segment out what we need, which isn't what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
But to your point, Jill, I wouldn't want to necessarily focus strictly on the amount because I firmly believe that if we have more advocacy on board for a certain number, we could probably go out there to the community, explain and educate why a piecemeal wouldn't necessarily work. Because I think we talked about it in one of the original topics. To say we'll come back 10 years later to ask for more money to do something, it's probably not going to happen. This is kind of going to be an all or none concept because people are not going to want to revisit additional funding. So
I disagree, but we'll talk later about
yeah,
that.
but you're right. I don't think 140 is going to fly
I don't think
anyway,
100 is gonna
right?
You can't,
But
you can't even bond that much.
right. So, but if we segment and we're maybe at 80 or 90 million, and we still think that's high, I think 80 or 90 million with everybody on board, realizing what the value proposition is from a school perspective, could potentially work. I mean, I wouldn't hold back on the number. I think as you guys are fishing through and segmenting, to Mr. Knoll's point, and then at that point we can have the discussion of, okay, here's what the must-haves are, here's where the cost is, and now let's evaluate what the likelihood that this could really go to the next level.
That was a suggestion, let's use CH Camel and Hilltop as those particular rates. And when we came, yeah, but when we came back and ran the model at these editions, that's why that went up. Now we have our, it was just recommendation. No, it just, that was something that was brought up to investigate on that particular one. And so we ran the model since that meeting and now have that cost. We'll talk, I'll go through it with you. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Mr. Knoll, when we do go for a levy or a bond issue, am I correct in thinking that it's usually like a 3.9, 4.9, 5.9, 6.9? Is that's usually how it's portrayed on the, okay, so now when we failed it, what were we going for, 6.9?
I think it was 6.9, 108 million.
We were going for 6.9, okay? So, like, if we kind of think backwards on this, and we ask the question, what would the community probably support? Would it be 5.9? Would it be 4.9? And see how much that would generate, and then that would be our cap, as far as, that would kind of set a cap for us as far as what we're able to do.
I also think
Does that
this
make
line is
sense?
about this cost. It was more than just the cost last time. All the negative things you've seen about everything else, the property site, people didn't want one school, period, online. We can't just say it's the only reason it didn't pass because of price. And honestly, you see how much it's going up. It's going up 10% again. We have to let the community know, if you kick the can down the road 10 more years, these elementary schools are going to cost about 30, 40% more than what it is right now.
Well, that's what's happening in the last 3
We have to tell people.
We need to break into groups, guys, or we won't get,
There you go.
so let's go through, we will stay afterwards and answer questions.
Take your numbers, Rita, head on back over. Take your numbers.
They're gonna spend the rest of the time over there.
Minutes, group discussion, and then
Are they gonna report out over there?
You should have your packets of information with all the master plans on them. So what the idea here for this activity is to go through, take a look at those, discuss in your groups which plans that you gravitate towards most. So I know there's 8 of them in there, but you'll probably find that maybe there's 2 or 3 that really stand out to you. So go ahead and focus on those. You could jot down pros and cons on the Post-it notes that we have. We will do a report out after a little while. And the idea for this is to really start to focus in on those plans that resonate the most with you as we start to narrow down what those options can be. We will be floating around for questions, but again, talking about the pros and cons of really those maybe 2 to 3 plans that really resonate with your group, and then we'll hear from you at report out. So how long should we give them? Is it 30 minutes? 25 minutes, so we'll report back.
So I was graduate 15
Stacey, we were saying even if you segment out if you look out you're touching everything. So at the end of the day, the cost still is, you're going to two buildings.
Okay, let's come up top.
You have to have a 15 million high school. You have to have.
I don't think you do.
Either the new PK or you move 7 and 8. I think either way. We were too busy talking.
That's okay, you can speak to it. All right, we can have your attention, everyone.
We didn't write anything down. Because we had a lot of discussion, a lot of our questions were, where are these plans going? We tried to not focus on that, but in the end, it's very hard to pick a plan and not know where we're putting it. We did scratch off several, I think, 1, 2, and,
Scratch off 3.
1 and 2 we like,
Yeah.
3 we scratched off,
4.
4 and 5 we scratched off. I think 6 is not super loved, but it's not awful. 7, so 7 and, 2 are similar, but speaking from a elementary school teacher perspective, I guess I like 7 better because I like this pre-K through 6 instead of pre-K through 8. My own personal opinion is I like number 1, but we didn't all agree on that. But your turn. I like 1.
Yeah, I like 1 too.
1 and 2. 1 and 2 were our favorites, but again, it kept
We like
falling
1
back
and
to
2
where it
for
was
distance.
going.
What were the reasons why you liked 1 and 2?
I talked enough this year.
Okay, well, on number 1, well, let's skip to 2. So on number 2, the big thing here for number 2 is, you know, we need to think about long-term and the efficiencies of running the school system with 1 or 2 buildings, okay, right? I mean, that's really, having multiple buildings is certainly and I understand it would be beautiful, but from a cost perspective of running a district, you know, you look at a PK through 8 versus having separate buildings for different grades, you know, you're much better off with a PK through 8. Now, we had discussed, you know, when we started talking about property and stuff like that with 2, so, and I understand we had discussed, Mr. Knoll, last meeting that I was unable to attend the property behind Hilltop?
We did.
Okay?
Yes, sir.
So we talked about that PK through 8 on that property, or some combination of that between Hilltop and that property, okay? So number 2 seemed to resonate.
Number 2 is good if you're trying to lessen the cost and number of buildings. One of the comments I made from the teacher side of things, a lot of what we hear is the hesitation from parents. I don't want my kindergartner and first grader with 7th and 8th graders. Even at the middle school level, I don't want my 5th and 6th grader with 11th and 12th graders. So that's why I'm not, we're doing the 2 building and the 3 building perspective. Those are our 2 favorites. I do think that there's gonna be a lot of pushback if we're gonna say that we are gonna combine greater grade levels together. It's just something to consider, that's all. I mean, the price point is not super different. There was another one in here that had us renovating and adding to Hilltop, and the price of it was, I think, actually more than the new Hilltop, so that one didn't make sense. So number 1 and 2.
There you go.
That's
Good report.
all right.
All right, table number 2.
We did all the talking.
Good.
What else was-
Good.
Okay, sorry for the sloppy writing, but trying to get it on here fast. Yes, if we all had all the money, and if we weren't gonna vote in this room for the well over 100 million, don't expect the rest of the population in town to do it. So we have to show that we've done our due diligence, and one thing we can all agree on is the less amount of buildings you have, the more cost effective it is, not just to build, but in maintenance down the road. You have your entire maintenance staff running around between 4 different buildings. Your buses go between 4 different buildings. You have 7th and 8th graders that spend a tremendous amount of their time here at the high school. They already filter in here, they're already part of the scheduling with everything, with all the sports, right down to the band events, and even some of the choir events. So age appropriateness, 7th and 8th grade work well already with the high school that is here. So that is the basic reason why we're looking at that. Other caveats could be, looking down the road, how effective would the existing Hilltop location be to use for possible administration offices, maybe special needs, something else? Do you keep all of it? Do you get rid of part of it?
The more we get rid of the excess property that we don't need, we don't want to be responsible for it, no insurance, no maintenance, sell that off and repurpose that money into what we need to have. Let's see. And again, it would be less locations for the buses to go to. That's basically narrowing it all down to what I believe what more people would be able to afford, what they would actually understand moving forward. Because we can't just say, this is what we want to build now, and how can we afford to get to that? How do we afford to keep it? And we need to sell that to the voters as well. Because we've got plenty of locations around us who have gone other avenues. They wound up losing their classes, they wound up losing teachers, they had to go to open enrollment, and they're still struggling. So, that's basically it for right now.
All right, thank you. Number 3. Yes, please, thank you.
We don't have too much. They didn't either.
I think we're gonna start kind of repeating each other here, but that's what we wanna see. That's what we're kind of saying. So we do like number 1, 2, and number 7. Can we sell number 1? I don't know. We all know that we need the new middle school. But the K through 8 is a good idea. If you separate them, I think. We have enough space. We also like number 7, whereas I don't mind the 7th and 8th graders coming up here because they are up here already. But those were kind of the ones that we were okay with. It's really hard for me to say we don't have to do anything with CH. Because I really feel CH is probably just as bad as the middle school at this point. Because I had 2 kids that went to CH years ago, and I got one at Hilltop now, and I can tell you there's a big difference. And I feel very bad for the kids that are at CH now. I think they deserve something too.
They got a great principal.
Yes, yes. It's hard for me to say, let's just do the middle school, because that is the priority, and that's what we might have to pass. I get it, but it's a hard decision to leave out CH. For us, that was it.
Good report.
Thank you.
Good report.
All right, table 4.
Good job.
Very similar, we also kind of identified 2, 7, and 1 as kind of the preferred plan. Number 2 and 7, obviously cost. So you look across the master plan options, lower in cost. A couple things, pros on number 2. These are a little bit more academic pointing, but shared resources is ideal, where when you're in one building, you can share resources more effectively from teacher to teacher, from grade to grade. One thing, having been a principal here for 40 years, that you might not think about from the outside, but we have a ton of gifted and grade level accelerated students here. A ton. So having that ability to get students access to higher level instruction, the more grades you have under one roof here, the more you can do that. And that happens a lot. Same with electives. When you have all of these different buildings, sometimes when you build a teacher schedule, there's holes in the schedule where we could be using really highly qualified teachers to offer electives for students in different grades that they can't get to right now because of the physical location of the buildings. One thing we said about number 2, though, is the design is significant here. Like, I came into Austintown as an administrator at the worst time, after they already designed all the buildings, and I was like responsible for helping to open them. And these were massive buildings that were floor after floor full of kids. Not good. And this would have to be pods where you could still maintain that grade level feel, even though you're part of a big facility. Okay. We also talked about large number of kids. With the Plan 2, you're looking at 1,800 K through 8 graders under one roof. Serious consideration there. But again, if you did the pods, think houses or Harry Potter, where you had the different silos, it could be okay. Number 7, we also like, because of the cost, again, grade level acceleration might even be more advantageous here, because now you have 7 through 12 in one building, And that's where you really start to see in this district, 7th and 8th graders taking high school level courses. Happens all the time. So that would be ideal. Same with electives. I could be a 7th grader who's really advanced, and I could be with Mr. Madison, who's teaching me at a much higher level than previously available. I added this. I think Plan 7 gives the high school students something new too, where all the other plans really don't. So adding that building might add another gym, might give them some new spaces that they can enjoy, where none of the other plans give the high school kids anything. Big concern, I did a 4-year, 60-hour-a-week case study on this. I was out there directing traffic every morning. If you add on to this building, you're probably looking at staggered start time, because I cannot see adding 2 more grades to drop off pickup. I just can't. We also talked about one, probably not as passionately, but we did like the balanced enrollment in each building, and we liked that we still had some age grouping across 3 buildings instead of a bigger group in 1 or 2.
Thank you very much. All right, table number 5. Number 5.
We all came pretty much the same numbers, looks like. Number 2, 1, and 7. And a lot of stuff you kind of said about 2. So, you know, long-term what it solves is all the middle school and elementary issues, which we know C.H. Campbell's not, you know, falling down, it's not that great. We know Hilltop's pretty good, right? But in 20 years, is it going to be there? Like, we're looking at down the turn. So if you do one building for all 3 of those, you solve all 3 of those buildings. Consolidation of services, consolidation of resources, energy efficiencies. There's a lot of money tied up in lighting, and when you do modern lighting, it's going to be like 70-80% more efficient right there. HVAC for everyone. I think there's an equity gap there that we don't really think about. So you talk to the parents that have their kids that when it's 92 degrees in there and they're laying on the ground with lights off getting sprayed by the teachers to keep them cool. Like, we're using evaporative cooling on children in school. Like, that's wrong. That's a big problem, I think, for us. Increased safety, obviously, dedicated resource officer, not split between different buildings, going back and forth, having one there all the time. Design is going to be critical if you do have that big group with wings, being able to have some general space. They're going to cross paths, but I mean, an 8th grader's not going to punch your 2nd grader in the eye either. You might say some bad words, but if they're watching TV, when you're watching, they're probably hearing some of them too. So I think that we're underestimating the ability of these kids to be mature and to be actually turned into mentors, to see the fact that you can actually make, these kids look up to you right now. Don't ruin that. These 3rd graders all think you're freaking awesome until you knock them over and call them a bad name. Like, if they get that mentality and it becomes that, I think it's great. Number 1's good also. I think the consolidation of buildings probably going to be costly short term, right? But if we do one thing now, and then in 10 years we're going to do a building right now costs $40 million, it's going to be $57 million, $65 million by then. So it's not going to get cheaper. Do it all now, rip off the Band-Aid. It's part of the social contract of having a public education system. You're paying for the generation that's going to be in front of you, just like the one that was before you paid for you. It's the money is what it is. Number 7, we didn't really like it originally, but you brought up a good point. Like, they're here all the time anyway. They have to use these fields anyway. It feels kind of kludgy adding a 2-story building onto the front of here to deal with more traffic, staggered start time, those parts of it, but it's not terrible, and maybe it makes it cheaper long-term to do a PK through 6. I think the main stat that Joe said that really lit me up was the fact that the fewer transitions you have is the guaranteed outcome. The grade levels, like kids adjust, man. They're flexible. They will figure it out. They're in terrible situations. Let's come up with a new one. Number 9. Built a new middle school on the practice fields, and then build a new high school on the practice fields. Turn this into the middle school, and then do the renovations on C.H. Campbell and other ones. It's probably not feasible either, but trying to use the land we have and getting towards the campus environment with shared resources that we already have here. It's just going to be hard to shuttle people back and forth between, if they have practice fields in one place versus another. So I think we're all coming pretty close to these areas.
Thank you. Table number. We'll find the donors for your plan, right? Table number 9, right? Okay, good.
Next one.
Table 6.
Okay, so we more or less, I'll try to only present the unique parts of what we thought about, because similarly here, 2 and 7 were probably our front runners by a pretty good margin. We talked about a few others, we talked about 5. Our priority starting out was we think a 90 million kind of mark is probably pretty feasible. You subtract 15 for the more or less mandatory renovations to this place, and that leaves you with 75 million, right? So that's right about at Master Plan 2, clocking in at 79 million to build that PK to 8 piece. So that's pretty close. You guys have already presented the benefits of 2. Some potential drawbacks of 7 that we thought about that I'm just going to throw in because they haven't really been presented yet. We were a little skeptical on that 30 million cost for that renovation, because you figure that 30 million is really 15 million, right? Because 15 of it is the renovations. So I personally thought it was a little odd that to bring 7th and 8th grade here would be 15 million. But if you look at Master Plan 5, you add on one more grade, which is 6th grade, and that 15 turns into 25 million. So we were just a little skeptical at that 30 million number in Master Plan 7.
And it's because this high school is oversized
Right.
for the 9 to 12 population, so we have room to put additional students in here without an addition.
Oh.
That's why.
Right, and that makes sense, but that's just kind of the feeling we had. That seemed a little bit optimistic, and maybe we're off here. But other issues here, the parking issues, right? Facilities, which you kind of just presented. If we move the middle school here, we're ultimately going to be shuttling kids to other facilities for the athletics, or at least we're cannibalizing some of our own fields here. And then at that point, we're kind of back to some of the issues we're dealing with now and some of the other plans. So 7 we liked, but I think 2 was generally speaking our front runner. Maybe you can offset some of those costs on properties. I think for us it was a question of where do you put this potential PK to 8. So again, things that I haven't quite heard other people mention, just for me to throw in. Issues with the, I personally think the Reese property is probably a little bit of a pipe dream, because if he bought it for $800,000, I can only imagine what he would want to sell it for. And at that point, we're probably out of our budget here anyways. And we kind of felt the same thing if we wanted to build on Shields, right? I believe you said last week it's 4 million. It was kind of like the ballpark for the traffic, was kind of the number we were given. And if it's 4 million for the roads and you're talking about hauling off topsoil and bringing in some utilities, you're probably talking another 10 million to build. I'm spitballing here, but another 10 million on top of whatever to build on Shields. So we didn't really look at that as a great option. So those are just some unique things that I don't know that I quite heard that I thought maybe were worth bringing up. But anyways, 2 and 7 by a pretty good margin, and then kind of some other ones. Are these for me? Whoa, I'm honored.
Just before we get into too many questions, we have one last short activity. So maybe we can go to table 7 and 8 next, and then we can.
I'll be around later.
But he'll be here after.
I'll stay around afterwards. Sounds smart. Oh yeah. For an English and a social studies guy.
There was math in it? You called that math?
Round estimating.
Round.
All right, table 7.
Table 7, we had a lot of discussion.
We're open for anything.
And
We don't want to do nothing.
Hey, Paul. How you doing? So table 7, we talked mostly about 2, 7, and 6, which there wasn't much discussion on 6 at all. There's a lot been said about 2. What we liked about 7 was the ability of students to have different opportunities for their education, if they were advanced or if there were other opportunities associated with a student being in this facility, because there are a lot of advantages to that. In regards to all of them, I think one of the positive things that we're seeing here is grade alignments. All the second graders are together, no matter, all of these master plans have that, and I think that's really, really positive. So that's, everything else has sort of been said, right, in regards to that.
Good.
Thanks. All right, table 8, the last table here.
Mr. Matt.
This says master plan number 2 was not a consensus at our table. Mostly this is just my opinion. We had a lot of different views. and some people made some points, none of them good. And these, nothing I say here hasn't already been said. I'm just echoing a lot of things. 2 buildings going forward for this reason right here, I think it is the number one thing. And I think also we need to see if we can purchase another site. If it's at all possible, we'd like to build on a fresh piece of ground so we don't have to build next to where we already have a building. So I think that would be this would be the catch me out here if this could happen. So that's what I got. Any questions?
Good report. Good report.
All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl to go over the last activity.
cat's meow.
Close
Nice.
out the meeting for us today. Is there one short question?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I've heard a couple of times, I'm just trying to understand, flush this out. I've heard a few different times about this idea that, or this concept that there's 7th and 8th graders coming to the high school. Can anyone kind of quantify that for me? How many kids are actually coming to the high school from 7th and 8th or 6th grade?
You mean to take classes? You mean to take classes?
Well, I mean, I'm hearing, I just kept hearing that.
During the school day, that's all we need.
So
During the school day, I think there's one.
yeah, kids that are taking high school credit classes don't leave the middle school.
Right, that's what I thought, but that's
So
why
we have teachers who are licensed 7 through 12 at the middle school that coach up those higher level courses today. They don't leave that building. Now, if you bring 7th and 8th graders over here, the whole group, just for numbers, just say 200 a class. That's low, but about 200. So if 7th and 8th graders come here, there'd be about 400 more kids. And we would, what we talked about last week was we would build an addition around the high school to accommodate those kids.
What percentage of those kids in middle school are taking high school level classes, 7 or 8?
There's not many.
Our point is, everyone's conversation.
Yeah.
Talking about option 7.
And we don't have a middle school.
We're coming here.
It's only math, right?
No, it's math. Now, you know this. It's math and physical science are the 2 classes that they offer.
Those kids aren't really, so people understand
Yeah.
here, this idea of adding 7 and 8 here because they're already coming here, that's not the case.
No.
They are staying at.
They're not coming here for academics, but some of the people in the room said, hey, they're coming here tonight for like a band show. or
They come to
choir.
track practice.
Yeah, yeah.
They come to run the track.
And then, that's just the concept there, and I'm with a teacher who's, very passionate about what she's thinking. The concept of, we talk about money and all those things like that, but really, let's think about the kids too, keeping them young instead of growing up too quickly. When you move them over to the 7 and 8 and add them to 9 through 12, that's different than when they stay PK through 8. So our argument for our table was keeping it PK through 8, if you're giving me the choice of PK through 8 or 7 through 12. Because of that fact of just trying to keep them young as long as you can. Because, that is something I think we all could agree on, that they're moving too fast through all the things that are coming at them, at such a young age.
Well said, table number 1. We're going to kick it over to Cheryl real quick. We'll explain a closing activity.
Real quick, the focus was for all the after-school activities, the 7th and 8th graders are all coming over here for all of that.
You have me at school? Why would I facilitate
All right, Cheryl.
We've got some great feedback tonight. You talked collectively, we've already seen some repeated themes. But now is your chance, as you exit, to individually vote on each plan. So at your table, there is a bag with red dots, blue dots, and green dots of different sizes. You can see over here a board, and at top, you'll see the red dot, the blue dot, the green dot, and all 8 master plan options up here on that board. Each one of you take one of each color. The red dots are worth 5 points. The blue dots are worth 3 points, and the smallest green dots are worth 1 point. And that's denoted up there on that board as well. You can take all of your dots and put all of them on one plan, or if you have several preferred plans, you can divide them up as you see fit, but no more than 3 dots, no cheating, and put them on, multiple plans. That way we can put a weight to your vote, and we'll see how that pans out, and I have a feeling it's gonna align very well. So with that said, our next meeting, next Thursday, is March 9th. Same place, we're gonna start mirroring the sites and short plans. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Hey, I'm sorry I don't know everybody's name. I told them we should all get names.
Yeah.
I wish I did.